Greetings, everyone, and welcome to the broadcast. I'm Mike Quartararo and
Jeff Hirvela.
my wonderful co-host. This is Mind Matters, Breaking Silence in Legal Spaces, brought to you by ACEDS and MCG. This is a space where we share some real stories and talk openly about physical and mental well-being, addiction and recovery, and of course, the tools and resources for dealing with all the above. Jeff, holidays are upon us. How's your
They
mental
are.
state?
Well, I'll try to keep this as concise as I can, but this is a time of year I get a bit in my head about mental state and wellness. So the short answer is things are great. I've got family coming to town. We're looking forward to celebrating a nice Thanksgiving with my family, my ex, and it wasn't always like that. We didn't all always get along, especially post divorce. So, the reason that this time of year can be a bit sensitive is I look back at the Thanksgivings in the past when I was using, and it was always a big celebration. It was always, I'd have the best booze or the best and make the biggest, time of things and want to be the center of attention. And it was fun until it wasn't fun. And quite frankly, I found myself uninvited to Thanksgiving in 2015. And that was the beginning of my separation and eventual divorce. I'm sharing that because that's hard to say. Like that's not something that you want to lead a podcast with. Like I got divorced 10 years ago on this holiday. However, it's true. And my life now is beyond my wildest dreams, so much better. But that didn't come just from a separation and sitting in my grief and anxiety. That came from me finding sobriety. That's just my journey. But then also doing a lot of work on myself, rebuilding relationships, earning back trust. And now, I'm in life with a sober partner. And I feel like, we were just saying before this started, things happen for a reason. I don't wish anyone to go through the things I went through. However, I firmly believe things happen for a reason, and I'm in a much better place for that. And I would say thriving in life right now. So, this podcast being an example of that. So, long winded way of saying I'm excited about the holiday, but there's a lot of history here, and we're going to talk about that today. So, Mike, how are you?
I'm okay. I've been getting some, for better or worse, calls and texts and emails from folks asking, I look, Patty died a little over a year ago. We did make it through the holiday season, although honestly, it was kind of a blur,
Yeah.
right in the wake of her passing. And so this is the first year where I'm sort of conscious and aware of her absence in a sort of more holistic way. And so people are reaching out to me and say, how you doing? What are your plans? What are where are you going? Who are you seeing? And all that stuff. And my response has been, I don't really have a plan. I'm just winging it. And that's, just kind of where I'm at right now. And whether that's good or bad, we can discuss and I'll take it up with my therapist. But that's where I'm at mentally. It's a little disturbing, I didn't decorate. I didn't do all the things we sort of traditionally did. And
Yeah.
yeah, I'm seeing family on Thanksgiving. Thank goodness for that. And thank you everybody for all the support. I really, really appreciate it. You have no idea. It means a lot. It's incredibly helpful, even if I don't, express that sort of openly. But that's kind of where I'm at. I'm finding little things to do around here, keep busy, and just, try not to think about, the sadness, I guess. That's kind of where I'm at.
Thanks for
Um,
sharing, man.
but yeah, enough about us. Why don't we bring in our guests? You want to do the
I'd
honors and
love to.
introduce Natalie?
Yeah, I'd love to. So Natalie comes to us professionally. She's an AI attorney with Duke Energy. And as it relates to our podcast here, she's also a mental fitness coach and focuses a lot on mental resilience. She's a speaker. She is a beautiful writer as well, shares a lot of really inspiring things on LinkedIn and other formats. And we're excited to have her here today to talk through just her journey. So why don't we bring Natalie in?
Hi, Jeff. Hi, Michael. How are
Hi,
you?
Natalie.
Thank you for having me. What a
Absolutely.
wonderful.
How are you doing today, Natalie?
I'm good. I'm good. It was intense listening to you two, though, talk about your journey because it brings back a lot of my journey. So, first of all, thank you so much for having me. It is an honor and a pleasure to be here. And this is a sensitive time of year, and grief is a sensitive topic and one that I know closely. So I can kind of launch into my story a little bit if that is a good kind of starting point.
Absolutely, absolutely. Please.
Yeah. So October 10th, 2016. So that is 9 years ago. I lost my second son. He was stillborn at 8 pounds, 2 ounces, completely unexpectedly. And my whole world changed in literally an instant when people say that, but it's so true. In a complete instant, my whole world was turned upside down. And so it was October, right? So right before the holidays. So, Michael, when you talk about going through the holidays and the blur, and those first holidays were brutal, there's no way to sugarcoat what it was like to lose my baby completely unexpectedly months before Thanksgiving and Christmas, where the holidays are supposed to be ones of gratitude and joy and bliss and being with family. And it was agonizing listening to you too. I can take myself right back to that place.
Hmm.
So 9 years out in 2025, I'm not actively grieving. That's the way I differentiate it. I think there's a difference between sitting in the rawness of your pain and then having years come that kind of lessen it a little bit. So you never get over it. You never get over losing your wife, your child, divorce, any of the traumas that we go through, but you learn to walk through it. You learn to cope. And I do think there is a difference between actively grieving, where you are sitting in a place where you cannot imagine how you will go on, and the place that I sit now, where I have a bit of perspective. You know, Jeff, you talked about the fact that now you see the blessings that kind of came from that grief and trauma and pain, and that's where I sit now. At the time, nobody wants to hear those platitudes. Again, I had a death. He's in a better place. Everything happens for a reason. It's all going to work out at the time. And I tell people that now. When you're comforting somebody who's grieving, it's about timing. What you say to them and when you say it is so key. Because I now, 9 years later, really do believe that this was all part of the plan. My son's name is Ethan Alexander Carter. That's the son that I lost. And I talk to him every day, and he's with me every day. And every time I catch 1010, which is his birthday on the clock, that to me is his way of saying hi, mom. When I speak about mental fitness, when I speak about his life, when I speak about my journey, I say that's the work that he and I do together. So he's always with me. He is an integral part of my life. He is an integral part of the woman that I am today. But to tell me that when I was actively grieving right after I'd lost him would have been poor timed, ill timed, to have told me, you're going to have this life that's going to be great and you're going to thrive and you're going to heal from this. I didn't want to hear any of that. I was in absolute agony. So I do think when we, as supporters of those who are grieving, walk with people in their journeys, we need to be conscious of when to say what. And it's tough. It's really tough to know what to say to somebody who has lost someone. I actually just learned of a friend of mine who just lost somebody like today. And even me, and a child, and even me, who is a mother who lost a child, I was at a loss for words. And I said, there are no words. There are no words to deal with that kind of grief. So, but I think honoring that for people who are grieving, especially during this time of year when people tend to assume that everybody's celebrating and everybody's joyous, I think it's really upon us as supporters and those of us who are so interested in how we treat others and kindness to remember that everybody is not celebrating this time of year. Everybody is walking their own path. And if all you can do is honor space for somebody and their grief and their pain, that may be enough in the moment. So I don't even know if you asked me a question generally, but that's just kind of, I guess,
We
kind of
didn't
give
ask
you
a
my little
question.
soliloquy.
We're just asking you to share a little bit of your story. You know, I find that grief comes in so many different forms and for different people. And I was talking to a friend recently who lost his job, and he described what he was experiencing as grief. Like from losing a job, you wouldn't think of it that way, but we all experience this in deep and profound ways, and it affects everybody so differently. And you know, I don't view what anybody says to me as platitudes. They're genuinely concerned, and that's what really matters, and that's what gives me comfort. I just need to know that people know where I'm at, and if they see something aberrant from me, they know sort of why. That's what I'm always kind of looking for. I don't know, Jeff, what's been your experience?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'm just curious from your experience, Natalie, like what like the right way of giving space and support would look like. I guess maybe because we mentioned both active and non-active, and I certainly understand the honoring the space, and maybe that's it. But I'm just curious if we could dive into that for like some practical. Maybe someone knows someone going through something, or they are going through it themselves, and they want to be able to communicate. This is how I would like, you know, interaction or support. I'm
Yeah.
curious.
Yeah. And first, let me say, Michael, I hope you give yourself the credit that you should, that when anyone reaches out to you in any way that they do, that you take that with the intention that they meant it rather than even becoming offended. Because not everybody's able to do that in honesty. Not everybody is able to say,
Absolutely.
you know what, when someone says he or she's in a better place, they just meant it to be kind and to reach out and they didn't know what to say. And some people, right, are not able to take it that way. So credit to you for being able to do that first. Second, Jeff, to address your question, literally, I was talking to someone today who knows the person who lost their child, and the person said, well, should we ask her what she wants us to do? And I said, oh, no. The first thing, grievers should not be required to think about how to be supported. We should do that for them. So whether if you are thinking, well, I know my friend or family member and they're not going to want me to just drop off food, or they're not going to want me to be intrusive. Yeah. If anything, you can give them three options. I can come pick up your kids for you. I can do your laundry, or I can make you some food. Which would you prefer? So that way, at least they're not sitting and thinking, because 99% of the time, if you ask someone in pain, whether that's they lost their job, whether they are getting a divorce, whether they lost a child, let me know if you need anything or what can I do? They're going to say nothing. They're going to say nothing. And when you say, let me know if you need anything, they are not going to call you 99% of the time. And they don't even have the capacity, even if they wanted help, even if they're comfortable. A lot of times you're not even be comfortable asking for it.
I was going to say, it's too uncomfortable.
Right. You're not comfortable asking for someone in your deepest sense of pain to support you and see that rawness and open and vulnerability and openness. So you're going to say, I'm good. I'm fine. I don't need anything. But when somebody offers and says, here is what I can do, which of these are comfortable for you? Which of these would help most? You get a different response, because you've given them an option where if they really don't want you in their house doing laundry, they don't have to tell you, I don't want you in here, I need my space. If they really don't want you picking up their kids because that's too sensitive, maybe because they lost a child and all they want to do is be around their kids themselves, then they can take your third option of the food. Or if they need the lifeline of someone picking up their kids because they can't even function, then you've offered that. And it also allows you to do, as the supporter, what you are comfortable doing and have the bandwidth for, so that it becomes a situation where you are giving of yourself willingly and lovingly, and you are also giving them the option and space to tell you what they are ready for.
That's beautiful. Thanks for that. And that seems like it might fall under a little bit more of the active grief. Someone that's like acutely in, dealing with the grief. I'm curious, does that change? I would imagine it might for non-active grief, where it might be not as sensitive, but it's still there. And people, maybe some ideas about offering support when you're in, years removed or not in active grief?
Yes. When That's a great distinction. And I love the idea of still supporting people who are not in active grief because we
Yeah.
don't really get that. I mean, quite honestly, if you lose a loved one past the funeral, people barely remember. Like it's easy to like everybody's lives are busy. So when anniversaries and birthdays roll around, people may remember, but people move through with their own lives. And so even you think years later, what I think is so important and what helps the person who is not actively grieving but still carries their loved one in their heart for sure is to honor and say that person's name, even to share memory. People are so tentative to bring up the person that you lost, thinking it will trigger you, like you have forgotten somehow that person isn't there. When I went back to work after I lost Ethan, so you're talking 9 years ago, I actually wrote my coworkers a letter about how to kind of deal with me. And I didn't think to even bring, I don't even know where that letter is now. I'm sure I could find it if I had to. But I said something to the effect that even though my son no longer lives, I still want him to matter. Something to that effect. That's a loose paraphrase. And as a mom, not bringing up his name, not asking anything about him, kind of devalued him for me. It wasn't like anyone could ever say his name. And I thought, oh, I had forgotten that I lost him. I wasn't thinking about Ethan. No, I was always thinking about him. So when you don't bring him up, it creates a situation where I feel like he doesn't matter. And and that was when I was actively grieving, right? I helped my coworkers. I broke the ice for them because I knew they were not going to know how to deal with this. And so for me, being able to tell them when I was actively grieving, here's how you can help deal with me and manage me, was key. But now, 9 years later, when people still help me honor him by talking about him with me, by talking about my journey, that's still important. So, Michael, for you with your wife, you're in what I call active grief. But years from now, you're going to love, I would think, someone to share a memory they have of her, right? You always want their memory to live on. And so if people can remember that 5 years down the line, 6, 7 years down the line, she still is your wife. She still was your wife. She still was a huge part of your life. And being able to honor and bring that up, I think shows the person that you still always honor their journey.
Yeah, nothing could be more true. And I was watching a news program. It's pretty popular, involved Anderson Cooper and some of the things he's doing with grief and stuff like that. And I always tune in for things like that just because I'm trying to sort of mature in my grief, if you will. And they had cameramen. They were following some of the families of children who'd been killed in school shootings, and these families are they're keeping the child's room exactly the way it was, and they hired a film crew. And there's actually a documentary being made about this now, but and I'm sitting there and I'm watching this and I'm asking myself, why would these families want this to live on in perpetuity like that? Why would they want this memory? And at the end of the program, what really stuck out to me most about everything is exactly what you just said. People just want their loved one to be remembered as someone who mattered. And that's it. I don't, Patty was a wonderful person. Um, and the people who met her remember her. Jeff's met her, I think. Um, and a lot of people in the industry know her just from coming to shows and things like that. And I think that's all I really want is just some acknowledgement. So I now understand why families do what they do in grief, no matter how you lost your loved one, and it's resonated profoundly with me. I'm learning every day, and it's getting better every day. I will say that it does get better. It doesn't necessarily get easier. Still get that feeling in my diaphragm from time to time. Anybody who knows. Um, yeah,
You learn to navigate it. You learn to
you
hold it
do.
differently. You learn to navigate it, and you do get joy again. So for the audience listening, if anybody listening is actively grieving, I remember telling my sister when I lost my son that I would never smile again. And keep in mind, I at the time had a 3-year-old already, who I adored. I mean, I like felt like our birthdays are a day apart. He was like my soulmate. And even though I am married, I love my husband, but he was like my little mini soulmate. And I remember still telling my sister, I don't think I'll ever smile again. And I'm the kind of person, I was even cracking jokes in the hospital when I lost my son, but I knew when I said smile again, I meant like really mean it, like not that surface, like you're just kind of cracking jokes to cope, but really mean it and have joy. And I remember one day, months and months and months later, I caught myself singing in the car. And I knew I was kind of like, I really love music. I love to sing and dance, and not sing like I'm any good at it. I'm no good at it, but just like in the car with myself, right? I like to sing. I like music. And I kind of caught myself singing the lyrics, and I thought, okay, I'm going to make it through this. So I think it is important that we tell the audience, you will make it through that. I would tell mothers who lost children, you will make it through this. And I would tell mothers who lost children, I lost a baby. And often people think, okay, well, if I can have another baby, that's how I'll cope. And I did have another child, but I didn't have another child for years. My youngest is 4, right? I told you that I lost my middle son when he was 9. So for 5 years, I didn't know if I would have another child. And I still was, to me and to others, I felt a demonstration of, even if you don't have another child, you're going to make it through this. You're going to make it through this grief. So in the same way, whether you've lost a spouse, a parent, a sibling, whether you've lost a job and you think the job market is horrible and I don't think I'm going to make it through this, there's nobody hiring, you will make it through it no matter how low your bank account gets, no matter how sad you are from losing your loved one. I tell people, I can guarantee you'll make it through. So hold on, take it moment by moment, not even day by day, moment by moment, and you will make it through, and your grief will shift and change. And by the way, I just told a friend this who lost her mother. I asked, how are you doing? Checked on her. I went to the funeral. Never even met her mother, but I went to the funeral to support her. And I described grief to her because she was like, I'll have these days where I'm doing okay. And I said, grief is like somebody who moved in and you think you're doing all right and you think they've left and you're like, good, they're gone. And then you come back one day and they're back and they've made a mess of your bathroom, your family room. They've trashed the place. And you're like, what are you doing here? And I said, but one day they will leave. And next time they come, they will actually ring the doorbell and you'll have a nice chat. You'll sit and then they will exit. And that is grief. In the beginning, it comes out of nowhere, trashes your place, trashes your heart. But as you work through the journey, it is actually something that you can be amicable with. I don't say that you embrace it, but again, you're able to open the door. She announces she's coming, and that might be a birthday, that might be an anniversary, and you chat and you work through those emotions, and then she parts and you go back to your life. But in the beginning, she's wreaking havoc, and she'll pretend she's gone, and then she'll come back unexpectedly. And my friend was like, oh my God, that analogy. She was like, I use analogies a lot in my life when I coach, in my work life. Yeah. And it was just one I'd never used it before, but I just, in talking with her as a friend, I just kind of came up with that idea of, you think you're okay? You think grief is kind of taken a back seat. She's kind of left, and then she pops back up and she can wreak havoc.
You should see this house.
See, I'm telling you. But one day she'll be a little bit more polite. One day it will be much more of a polite, civilized back and forth.
Yeah.
It takes time to get there, though. It takes time.
Yeah, it is timely. And I'm going to use some of this myself this upcoming holiday. So 4 years ago, I lost an uncle to health complications that resulted from some unhealthy lifestyle over the course of his life. And it was gut-wrenching because he had not traveled to be with family for Thanksgiving, and he was isolating and withdrawing, and he passed shortly after Thanksgiving 4 years ago. And that same family's coming out again. And it's been like, we've shared memories and we've said, nice things. And maybe she was here and this is a funny thing. And he was just a big personality. And he's like very, very missed. Like he'd just be the funny, entertaining one and just bringing the party together. So I like that idea of just keeping it simple and maybe just honoring his name and maybe sharing a memory, keeping it simple.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. And I think, I call it, we've probably all heard of like micro habits. When I coach people, I always say start small. We tend to sometimes want to take on too much too soon.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, when we think of anything, we're like, okay, if you lose your job, I'm going to apply for 50 jobs today. Or, I'm going to lose 50 pounds in a couple months. Versus, why don't we tackle things smallly? Like, why don't you just go for a walk? Right? If you're trying to lose weight, why don't you just go for a walk as your first step? If you're trying to get a new job, why don't you just tweak your resume and let that be enough for that day?
Yeah.
So I don't think grief is different. I think we sometimes try to tackle too much all at once. Okay, I'm going to go to the holiday dinner. I'm going to stay all day. I'm going to make sure that I have a stoic face. I'm going to make sure that I talk about him or her that I lost. I'm going to make sure I don't cry. We've got all of these to-dos that we must achieve as we're grieving. And instead, I call it do like a micro moment, like one thing, like I'm going to go to the dinner and I'm going to only stay 10 minutes if that's all I can handle. And if you end up staying longer, so that's also how you kind of trick the mind a bit. When you tell yourself, all you have to do is just go, show up, and stay for appetizers or the first course or however your family or friends do it. You may end up staying longer. Most of the time you do. It's the same trick with exercise. If someone is struggling to start an exercise routine, I don't say, okay, go to the gym for an hour, hit it hard, weights, cardio. You say, why don't you just walk for 10 minutes? That's it. All you have to do is 10 minutes. And undoubtedly, that person ends up walking for longer and says, you know what, I also maybe did a little running. But you didn't force them. There's no pressure. So when you say you must come to the holiday dinner, and sometimes people who are family of the grieving, think they're being supportive. They don't want you to isolate, right? You mentioned that your uncle was isolating. And so they're trying to get you out and they're trying to because they feel like that will help. And it's not that they're necessarily wrong, but that can feel overwhelming when you are grieving. I did not have anxiety until I lost my son. I don't have it now either, although, well, I can probably stress sometimes, but generally I don't have anxiety. But right after I lost Ethan, I was anxious. I was scared to go out. Like I was scared to be confronted. I was scared to have to deal with people's reaction to the loss, for me to have to explain the loss.
Yeah.
For me to have to tell people, I didn't even know if I could handle it. And then it would cause intense anxiety in me. So think about if someone says, come with me to the dinner, just come, it'll be good for you to see people. That may cause intense anxiety for somebody who is grieving, who doesn't even know if they're going to be able to hold it together if their loved one's name is brought up, or if they see something that triggers them. They've got a memory of Christmas and they see a Christmas tree. But if you say to them, just come with 10 minutes, all you got to do is 10 minutes. And then I say to people, have an exit strategy. How are you going to leave? Have a plan to get out of there. Seriously, right? Because if you don't, you will feel overwhelmed. And A, it may make you not even want to go. And B, when you get there, you may be like, this isn't working for me. And you may start to panic. But if you say, no, I'm going to go for 10 minutes, and maybe you have a friend who you can even say, okay, I'm going to use a word. And when I use this word, it means that I've now had enough and I need to leave. And so just the way the brain works, just planning that out and thinking through that brings your anxiety down just a bit. Doesn't mean it's going to be easy, but you've taken yourself maybe from a 10 to like a 7. And even that, going into the event at a 7 instead of a 10 is going to help. And I used to do that when I was grieving, because you really don't know what can trigger you at any moment. It can be a song, it can be a word, it can be an object. And to feel like you're trapped into a 2, 3, 4 hour event, especially during the holidays, is going to make people just not even want to chance it.
Yeah. And I think you're kind of crossing over to some universal tools here as well. The holidays, we kind of started out saying like it's a happy time of year. Everyone's supposed to be happy. Not everyone goes into the holidays. Some people bring anxiety, even if it's not related to grief. I brought anxiety related to, like, ironically, I felt anxiety being sober in the holidays. Like, I should have been proud about that. Like, should have, but that's a label. But yeah, it's one of those things I was proud of, but I was also like, ooh, I've got an issue and I had to get sober, right? And so I had my own anxiety going into it. Some people have social anxieties, and I think these are tools that we're focusing on the grief, but it's really important for people to know, like, you're not alone. If you have some kind of anxiety or some kind of fear going into this, and I like all the things you were talking about. They were kind of in my toolkit early on when I would go into social functions, especially around the holidays. And I would feel overwhelmed that I'm not going to be fun or I'm not going to be interesting. And it's similar to, what if someone asks me how I'm doing if I'm in grief? What if someone mentions my son and I'm in grief? And so having these as a toolkit, and I'll add a few to them. You mentioned having the exit strategy, and I think one of the things I heard early on was it's also okay to just go, like, take a walk, like you were saying, like, just get out and it's no one's going to be upset if you go for a walk and come back. If you go call someone and then come back, it's okay to prioritize your health. And even if you just go into another room, go to the bathroom and sit down and take a few deep breaths, do some grounding work, things like that. Like, it's okay to just take a moment, and no one's going to say, well, where the heck did they go? Like, that's rude of them to disappear for a moment. And then you can rejoin the events, as you are comfortable. And so I think just kind of saying that out loud, knowing you don't have to power through, you don't have to prove something and overcome the anxiety. It's okay to do a little self-maintenance too to get through it.
Yeah, I just want taking a break. Oh, sorry, Michael.
Yeah, no, I just want to say that sober Jeff is just as fun and interesting.
I know he is. I can imagine. I didn't meet him before, but I can tell he's just as fun now.
Let's pivot to some resources. I understand, Natalie, you're involved with a community organization. Tell us a little bit about that and how that's helpful.
Yeah, so Kindermorn is an organization in Charlotte. It is a local organization, so we serve Charlotte and surrounding communities, surrounding counties. And it is an organization that helps parents who have lost a child of any age. So we have had 80-year-old parents who've lost a 60-year-old. And then we also help, parents who've lost babies, as I did. So any parent who has lost a child, or any child who has lost a loved one. We serve those two populations, those two demographics when it comes to grief. We provide grief services. So I actually sit on that board. They helped me. They are a huge part of my healing process. I credit them with a lot of the work I was able to do as I worked through my grief and immediately began giving back. And it's interesting. I met a woman. She was my intake counselor. And on one of the first days she met me, she said, you are going to help a lot of people. And I was in the middle of my grief. I was like, help people? Like, I'm just trying to put one foot in front of the other. But she immediately spotted. And sure enough, helping people became also part of how I healed. So way before I was even quote unquote healed, and healing is a continuous journey. It is not a point in time. But way before I could have said I was out of active grief, or I felt like some semblance of myself, I started helping other mothers and being that voice to put to their grief and that shoulder that they could lean on, whether they had other people in their life or not. Because the power of Kindermorn and the power of that resource is linking up with people who actually get it and know exactly what you're going through. So I had really supportive family and really supportive friends, but I didn't have anybody in my life who had lost a baby like I had. And so linking up with people who knew what it was like. So Michael, you can meet people who've lost a parent, And not most of us will lose our parents. Most of us will live past our parents. But losing a spouse, a wife, is very different. It's a different shade of grief. And so linking up with people who understand what it's like to lose a partner, a life partner, a spouse, is different than meeting someone who's lost a parent. Again, it's all grief, but that commonality really makes you feel like, okay, I'm not alone. So that's what Kindermorn is in the Charlotte area. I sit on the board. I've been on the board since 2020. And we have a duck race in Charlotte. Once a year, we raise money for the loved ones that we've lost. I always have a team in honor of Ethan. And it's just a great resource for families in the community because grief isn't talked about a lot. You know, this podcast is awesome that you're doing this for people. I had never heard of Kindermorn, though I've been in Charlotte for years and years, until I needed them. Because grief is not one of those topics that we shout from the rooftops, just like mental health is now becoming something that we discuss more openly, but it really has been something that we've shied away from as a society. And so you don't hear about resources like this as much because it makes people squirm. It makes people uncomfortable. Death and dying and grief is tough to deal with. And so people don't openly talk about it. But it is a part of life for everybody in some form or another. And so helping to support each other by talking about it, by kind of demystifying it and destigmatizing it is important. And then also providing people with the resources so they can get the help that they need.
Fantastic.
Absolutely fantastic. We're almost out of time here. Last questions, Jeff, closing thoughts?
Well, I was just going to add a few more things. We're talking about resources and kind of the, we were joking at one point about like a holiday survival guide, some other tools. So I'm going to put a list of things together, but I want to add a few more things. Being of service and service minded going into the holidays, asking, can I do the dishes? Can I take out the trash? These are things you can physically do to kind of get into action, get into your body and do something to get out of your head. And it's something that I found useful myself in the past. And then there's a cool method that I learned in my mental health first aid class, the 5-4-3-2-1. We were talking about this. So if you're in the middle of an anxiety attack and things are spinning out, go get yourself some space and do this little quick method. Think of 5 things you can see. Think of 4 things you can touch. Think of 3 things you can hear. Think of 2 things you can smell. And think of 1 thing you can taste. And these are all ways of kind of getting you back into your body, into the present, because I think it's a lot of us, the idea is that you get caught up in your thoughts and your emotions at times. And a good way to ground is to get back into your body and get back into the present. So just a few little tips I wanted to share as well, and to add to what Natalie shared. So
another thing I would say, those are fantastic tips. And even when you said be of service, the idea of, again, getting out of your head and helping someone in some small way really does help you defocus your own grief, even for the moment. And there are so many people suffering in so many different ways in the world, quite just honestly. So it is so easy in order to just pick something else and someone else to help, because people are always going through something, right? Isn't there that saying, be kind, for you never know what battle somebody is fighting? And so I would say that, agree with you wholeheartedly. Make sure to give of yourself in some small way. And another thing I'm going to tell you that's super simple, drink some water. I say hydration changes vibration. Literally, if you sit down and drink 2 glasses of water, I find that when I'm in a funk, and I don't even mean a grief funk, I just mean like life is lifing and I'm just in a funk, and I drink some water, it changes that quickly. It shifts my perspective. It shifts my brain a bit. So it may sound kind of wonky, but I ask the audience to try that. Drink some water when you are in the middle of any kind of emotional issue as a first step. I'm not saying it's the cure-all, end-all, but it is a really good first step.
Love it.
There's a reason they say if you're experiencing some distress or anxiety, there's a reason they say take deep breaths.
Absolutely.
because it changes the chemical composition in your body. It slows your heart down and brings some calm. Just 2 or 3 deep breaths, I find, just can move me from one place to another fairly quickly.
So
It's really amazing.
believe in that. We don't use our breath enough. And I think for the audience, when you look at life, when you look at dealing with trauma, grief, anxiety, think of the things as you have at your disposal as a toolkit. It's not just one thing. So therapy is really important. Connection with others is really important, right? Healing from grief takes de-isolating yourself. Isolation is not a good strategy. Water is important. Moving your body is important, right? All of these things work together to help you move through the grief process. So don't ever think of one thing as if I just do this. They're all really important and work together really nicely as you work to heal.
I do want to make sure we also cover one last thing. We talked about it before this podcast. You've got family in Jamaica, and right now there's a lot of recovery still happening there and a lot of need. I just heard in the news we're fortunate as the first year in like 10 years that we haven't had a hurricane hit the States. However, Jamaica was hit really hard and you had family that's directly impacted. So I do want to make sure that we acknowledge that we're going to post some resources for support there. I don't know if you want to say anything quickly about that as well.
Yeah. Listen, guys, I would so appreciate even a couple dollars helps. I have an aunt and an uncle and cousins who literally lost everything. Our family home was completely destroyed. It's been in our family for years and years. And this is already a third world country. So if something like that had happened in the US, it would have been really hard. This was a Category 5 that has, I think it's tied for the second strongest hurricane in history. And if it had happened in the United States with our infrastructure, it would have been devastating. But with Jamaica's resources, it is triply, quadruply so. So any little bit helps. This is the holiday season. I know a lot of people are going through it in different ways, but if you find it in your heart to help, would so appreciate it. So thank you.
Good.
Natalie, this has been wonderful. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for being a voice in this area. Jeff, your closing thought.
No, I think there's a lot of great tools in here. Natalie, thank you for being open with your story, the hope and inspiration, and just the practical approach to dealing with this. You're an example of, what it looks like to come through this as a strong, resilient, individual and share a message of hope with everyone. So thank you so much for that.
You're so welcome. Thank you guys for having me. It has been honestly my honor and my privilege.
Awesome. Well, once again, everyone, you're not alone. Hope everyone has a happy holiday. And thank you for joining us in the adventure here, one step at a time.